She was such a troublemaker, right to the end, always getting in my way. My husband spat out these words with disdain. Can this man truly be human? Before even considering him as a parent, he's the worst kind of person. I'm sorry. I'll avenge him in your stead. Standing in front of the funeral attendees, I read the letter left by our daughter into the microphone. Hearing the contents of the letter, my husband was frozen, his face drained of all color. What in the world do you think you're doing? My father-in-law's angry shout echoed throughout. Now, the revenge begins. My name is Katie, a 40-year-old housewife. I've been married to Caleb for 15 years. We met in high school. In our sophomore year, we ended up in the same class and met for the first time. Becoming deskmates was the start of our conversations, and working together for the school festival brought us closer. After the festival, he asked me out, and we started dating. We continued our relationship through college. Caleb moved out on his own in college, so I spent a lot of time at his place. After graduating, we both started working and became busy, but still made time for dates and meals out. As working adults, our increased incomes allowed us to travel during our extended vacations. I treasure the memories of all the places we visited while dating. 3 years into our careers, we decided to get married. We had saved enough for a wedding, and having adjusted to our jobs, felt it was the right time. Having dated since high school, we were already acquainted with each other's parents, making the wedding preparations smooth. Many, including our high school friends, attended our wedding, celebrating our union. Then, we went on our honeymoon and began our married life. Married life was delightful. Having dated since our sophomore year, over 8 years had passed, but married life still felt fresh. Every day was exciting, and changing my last name to his made me truly feel married. Our marriage was going smoothly. 3 years in, our daughter Zoe was born. Oh, she's like an angel. So incredibly cute. My husband, holding our newborn daughter, said so. I'll work my hardest to protect our family. Thank you, be our strong pillar and support us well. Leave it to me, he said firmly. With more to protect, my husband seemed even more dependable. After giving birth, I switched to a part-time role at the same company to have more time with our child. Raising our daughter was incredibly joyful. Every crawl and step she took was a moment of joy, and I'd often share videos and photos, acting like the proudest parent. My husband would say, I wish I could have seen it, regretting missing those moments. On days off, spending time with our daughter filled our lives with happiness. As she grew, we could communicate more, enriching our family life. My husband and I adored our daughter, taking her to various places, allowing her to experience a world of adventures. I often wondered what kind of adult she would become, what dreams she would chase, and what path she would follow. Just thinking about it filled me with excitement. However, when our daughter was in the 3rd grade, our blissful life was turned upside down. It happened while I was working part-time. Suddenly, I was told I had a phone call from the hospital. Our daughter had collapsed during class. I rushed to the hospital in a panic. My husband left work early, and we received the news from the doctor together. We were faced with an unimaginable reality. Your daughter has a rare disease. Depending on the treatment, she has about a year left to live. My mind went blank. My daughter had contracted a severe illness with no cure available. All we could do was administer medication to ease the symptoms, but it wouldn't stop the progression of the disease. We were in shock. Why would fate inflict such a cruel punishment on such a young child? Why did it have to be our daughter? Her condition worsened rapidly. 6 months later, walking became difficult, and she could no longer attend school. Our days were spent visiting the hospital and resting at home. Gradually, she couldn't even get out of bed and became completely bedridden. I quit my part-time job to care for her around the clock, fearing something might happen while I was away. We had to support our daughter with all our might. But it was around this time that my husband's attitude began to change. He became irritable at home for no apparent reason. Welcome home. Dinner is ready. Oh. Huh? Why fish? Oh, it was on sale today. Huh? Are you kidding me? I come home tired from work, and you serve fish? Normally, you'd prepare something more substantial like meat. I'm sorry. Seriously, get it together. Do you know who you're eating thanks to? He ate his dinner with a foul mood. I was perplexed by his sudden change in behavior. After that, every time we met, he had some complaint. The house was always tense when he was around. It was peaceful and calm when it was just my daughter and me, but his mere presence made me uneasy. Why was he always so irritated? And then, he started coming home much later. He claimed it was due to overtime, but honestly, I felt relieved when he was late. His presence was mentally exhausting. Yet, I also felt lonely. He had stopped caring about our daughter entirely. Hey, talk to Zoe more, please. Huh? I'm tired. You take care of her during the day, that's enough. Anything more is just spoiling her. What is that supposed to mean? What's this indulgence you speak of? My daughter, despite her struggle with a rare disease, is desperately clinging to life. At that time, 2 years had passed since her illness began, yet she fought to live on. That's why, even though she was given about a year to live, she wanted to live with a strong spirit, and was still able to stay at home for her care. Why can't my husband commend our daughter's efforts? She might die at any time, yet he finds it bothersome to engage as a parent, which is absurd. Afterward, not only did my husband start coming home late due to increased overtime, but he also began spending nights out more frequently. With no contact to me whatsoever. What on earth could he be doing out there? Is he really that busy with work? But I found myself not caring as much about it, as I started to develop an aversion towards my husband. Therefore, days without my husband felt more relaxing. Even when he was home, I hardly spoke to him anymore. Perhaps sensing this atmosphere, he didn't try to talk to me more than necessary. Yet, our daughter seemed saddened by this situation. Did mom and dad start disliking each other? Because even when you're together, you hardly talk. And when I do hear your voices, it's mostly arguing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. But it's okay. We're not on bad terms. Really? Yes, really. Your dad's just really busy with work, so when he's home, he's resting. That's why I don't talk to him much, to let him rest. Oh. I see. My daughter seemed a bit relieved by this explanation. However, she appeared lonely that her father wasn't talking much to her. Dad, do you think he's come to dislike me because I'm sick? That's not true at all. A parent would never dislike their child. Like I said, it's just because he's busy with work. He doesn't dislike you, so don't worry. Okay, I understand. After putting my daughter to bed and leaving her room, I sighed. What am I doing, causing my daughter, who's fighting for her life, such worries? When my husband returned, I mustered the courage to speak to him. Hey, Zoe's been feeling lonely. She wondered if you started disliking her because she's sick. Did Zoe say that? My husband, who seemed bothered by our conversation, was surprisingly taken aback to hear that from our daughter. Finally looking at me, he asked. Yes, that's right. So, could you please talk to her a bit? She's already lived beyond the prognosis, so it wouldn't be strange if we lost her at any time. I want neither of us to have any regrets. Okay, I understand. With a guilty look, my husband muttered his agreement. The next day was Sunday, so I deliberately created some alone time for my husband and daughter by going shopping at the supermarket and elsewhere. After about 2 hours, I returned home. Did you get a chance to talk with Zoe? Yeah, we talked about a lot. That's good to hear. I was relieved, thinking it was for the better, even if just a little, for my daughter. However, my husband then started getting ready to go out. Where are you going? Going out to eat with some friends. Why not have dinner as a family of 3, since we're all here? I was invited, so I can't just say no. I've talked with Zoe, so my part is done. Let me be free now. With that, my husband left the house. Let you be free, what does that even mean? I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing had been resolved. I had thought my husband was talking out of concern for our daughter, but perhaps it was just a sense of duty to him. At that moment, I decided to stop expecting anything from him. It was enough that I cared deeply for our daughter. With that thought, I made an even greater effort to cherish my conversations with her. One day, my husband came home in a foul mood. Hey! Get dinner ready, quick! Okay. I had stopped trying to say anything to my husband. So, I prepared dinner, set it in front of him, and was about to head to our daughter's room when he called out to me. Hey, pack a week's worth of clothes in my duffel bag. What? I've got a business trip. Make sure you pack everything I need, including my razor. He didn't bother to clear his plate after eating and went straight to the bath. Why should I have to do all this? Yet, I knew he'd be furious if everything wasn't ready by the time he got out of the bath, which could upset our daughter. Sighing, I went to his room and packed his clothes in the duffel bag. Honestly, him being away for a week was a relief. His absence meant I could relax a bit more. The next morning, he left without a word of thanks or anything else. Annoyed, I decided to do as I pleased. First, I invited my parents over to see their granddaughter. With my husband away for a week, they could stay without worry. My parents were both happy and saddened to see their granddaughter bedridden. They smiled in her presence, but their faces were filled with sorrow and loneliness after she fell asleep. It's just so unfair. Why couldn't it be an old codger like me getting sick, instead of a good child like Zoe? My parents stayed until just before my husband was due back. Zoe had enjoyed talking with her grandparents after so long. However, as time went on, her condition worsened, requiring hospitalization. I felt the looming dread that her time was near. I visited her in the hospital every day. But my husband never came to see her. Instead, when he came home early and found dinner not prepared, he sent me angry messages. I was beyond sighing in frustration. If he couldn't care for our daughter, we were better off without him. Yet, without him, I couldn't dedicate myself entirely to caring for her. Frustratingly, his work allowed me the time with our daughter. Both sets of grandparents visited her often in the hospital. Zoe was always so happy to see them. On her 12th birthday, the nurses prepared a cake, and we all celebrated in her hospital room. But about a month later, her condition deteriorated, and she passed away. I was devastated and broke down in tears. Though I had braced myself for this moment, the reality shattered me completely. My parents tried to console me, but they too were in tears. Yet, I must see my daughter off properly. I arranged and prepared for the funeral with my parents. There are things I must do. All for my daughter. I shifted my emotions, holding back the tears as I proceeded with the funeral preparations. We arrived at the funeral home early, before the guests. My husband was irritable about having to get up early since he had been on a business trip until yesterday. That alone was infuriating. He hadn't been reachable when our daughter died. He had the audacity to claim that even if he were reachable, he couldn't have come from his business trip location. Attempting to light a cigarette with a frustrated demeanor, he was stopped by my reprimand. Go smoke in the designated area, please. TCH. He walked off in a bad mood after I pointed it out. On his way to the smoking area, standing before our daughter's coffin, he said something appalling. What a trouble you've been, always in my way until the very end. Such words were spat out by my husband. Is this man really human? Below any decent human being. I was speechless at his cruel words. I couldn't move until he walked toward the smoking area. Coming to my senses, I approached the coffin. I'm sorry. I'll avenge your father in your stead. With that promise to my daughter, I steeled myself. I could never forgive that man. Then, the funeral began. Despite his earlier cruel words, In front of the relatives and others, he pretended to cry, saying Zoe, as if mourning. I knew it was an act because he applied eye drops before approaching the coffin. The unsuspecting relatives were moved to tears, thinking he truly cared for our daughter. Unforgivable. I'll expose his true nature no matter what. As the funeral neared its end, it was time to read a letter left by our daughter. A letter, really? He seemed surprised, unaware of its existence. Yes, indeed. We need to share her words with everyone. Standing before the attendees, I read out the letter my daughter had left behind. It mainly contained words of gratitude towards me, who had been taking care of her. With each word, tears choked my speech. The relatives were also moved to tears. But as I reached the part about my husband, I took a deep breath. To Dad. Reading her words about him, my tears naturally stopped. You were hardly ever home, Dad, as if avoiding us. When you were, all I heard were your angry shouts at Mom. You used to make time to play with me, take me on drives, to various places. But after I became bedridden, you changed completely. Mom tried to be strong in front of me, but I could tell she was deeply troubled by you. It hurt me, thinking it was my fault things had become like this. But it wasn't. Remember the day you talked to me in my room, when Mom was out shopping? It felt like the old you had come back, and I was so happy. But then, thinking I was asleep, you answered a call. I heard everything, Dad. Planning a week-long trip with another woman. Did you enjoy Disney without us? You told her you loved her, didn't you? Hearing that, I knew you didn't care about Mom or me anymore. So, after I'm gone, please leave Mom. Don't make her unhappy any longer. Free her from you. The room buzzed with whispers as I finished reading. My husband stood frozen, pale-faced. What have you done? Shouted my father-in-law. The revenge had begun. My husband couldn't utter a word, standing there stunned. My father-in-law grabbed him by the collar, shouting, "You fool," before striking him. My husband, staggering, tried to deny the affair. Dad, it's a misunderstanding. What's the difference? Zoe would never lie. But I haven't been unfaithful. My husband stubbornly denied everything. Still holding the microphone, I told him. I've already got the evidence. Stop this futile resistance. Indeed, I had seen Zoe's letter a while ago and had hired a detective agency to investigate. And I got plenty of evidence of my husband's infidelity. I showed those photos to everyone on my phone at the funeral. Everyone attending the funeral glared at my husband. To go on an affair trip when your own child's life is hanging by a thread, that's the end of you as a human being. I didn't raise you to be such a terrible adult. Mom. Dad. You're no longer a son of ours. We disown you. How can this be? My husband slumped to the ground. I was just trying to escape the pain. I didn't want to face the reality that my daughter had become like this. What was he even saying? Even so, that's no excuse for infidelity. And if that were the case, you'd spend more time with Zoe, right? Don't lie now when it's gone this far. Plus, I heard from your parents. You asked them for money for Zoe's treatment because it was so expensive? I didn't hear anything about that. So, you were using the money they sent over for yourself? Exploiting your daughter's illness to gather money for your affair? That is. Don't mess with me. How dare you do something so low and then claim you're suffering? Zoe was the one suffering the most, fighting desperately to live with her illness. Having a father like you, Zoe is the one to be pitied. You don't belong at this funeral. Get out of here now. I confronted my husband and yelled at him with all my might. He fell on his behind with a small cry of eek, and then hurriedly ran off. After that, I recomposed myself and continued with Zoe's funeral. After the funeral, my in-laws apologized deeply to me. They offered to help with anything, including divorce and alimony. Through a lawyer introduced by my father-in-law, I demanded a divorce and alimony. But that wasn't enough for me. I took the house my husband bought and also told everyone at his workplace about what he had done. My ex-husband, who had been promoted to manager, lost all his credibility overnight, was demoted, and then transferred to the countryside. He asked his mistress to come with him, but she bluntly rejected him, saying she had no interest in a man without money. To his mistress, my ex-husband was just a wealthy plaything, it seems. Abandoned by his parents and relatives, my ex-husband now lives alone in the countryside, working in humiliation and spending his days in loneliness. It's all his own doing, and honestly, I wish I could beat him up until I felt satisfied. Meanwhile, I sold the house I got from my ex-husband and moved back to my parents' house. With the alimony from my ex-husband and his mistress, it amounted to a significant sum. After Zoe's death, I had no motivation to work for a while, but gradually, I started to think more positively and got a part-time job at a cafe near my parents' house. I love the cakes you make. Remembering what my daughter used to say, I now bake sweets every day. While working at the cafe and honing my baking skills, I hope to one day add my own sweets to the menu. And just like Zoe was happy eating my cakes, I want to see someone smile from eating my cakes. For Zoe's sake, I have to live my life to the fullest. With that thought, I'm putting my all into my dream today as well.